Yeah. So IAM is the first service we need to use when we created the AWS account also. By default, when we create the account, mostly our organization is going to create one uh, root account and using their company like a email ID like this, the company is going to create the root account. But one of the best practice what AWS is telling is don't use root account for the second time. First, we need to create an IAM user, and from the second time onwards, we need to use the IAM users itself. And if I have 40 employees or maybe 400 employees or 4,000 employees in our company, for everyone we need to give the permissions managing through IAM level itself. Okay, so what is the meaning of IAM? IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. For AWS services, IAM is going to provide authentication and authorizations. So IAM is going to provide the authentication and authorizations for the AWS services. What is the what are the things we can create is, say here mostly we have four components: AWS users, groups, policies, and roles. So mostly we need to understand these all the four we need to understand. Like first coming to IAM, like if I come to the IAM, so now here, like we can create like who can access our resources. So we have the EC2, or maybe we have S3 bucket, or we have EBS or EFS kind of file mounts. Okay, Kubernetes cluster. Who can access our resources? We can define, or like maybe resource level itself, or like a policy driven also. Say I have given the S3 bucket. But I want to restrict that, like maybe to write the data into or to delete the data, like the policy based also permissions we are going to keep. Now here, as we discuss in the main components, we have the IAM users and IAM groups. IAM user is a straightforward entity. What is the purpose of the IAM user is? So we have persons in our company who want to access our AWS. For them, like we want to give the access by creating the users. Like a IAM user is an entity that we can represent a person or application that interact with the services. Mostly for the users, not with the application. For the individual persons, we are going to give, and we are going to keep the credentials also, like AWS access key, secret key, or we have the IAM username, password. With that, they're going to access. So now, whenever we have an IAM user is there, IAM user can use his account ID. So we'll have 12-digit account ID we have. Then he is having his username, then password. But we have one more type of access, that is programmatic access. In the programmatic access, what we are getting is we are getting access key and secret key. Okay, say from the GUI or from AWS management console. If you want to log in from the AWS management console, we will have the a username, password we have, but I want to use a command line, or I want to use APIs, or I want to use maybe SDKs. I want to use any third-party tools, want to communicate with my AWS account. Then for that, we require programmatic access. Okay, so now for your users, who is going to provide the programmatic access? IAM itself is going to provide the like a programmatic access. We don't have the username and password. We are going to get access key and secret key. So using those access key and secret key, we can authenticate programmatically. But if you want to access through GUI, what we require is, so we require the account ID. Like every account will have a 12-digit account ID we have. Okay, so then like we are going to get the account ID we are getting, and we are getting username and password. For every user, we are getting a username and password. With that, we are going to log in. Okay. So then, in the same way as IAM users, we have a groups also. What is the concept of the group is when we have more number of users, always is recommended to go with the groups, and we are not assigning the permissions to the individual users. We are assigning those permissions to the groups, and all users in that group automatically going to get those permissions. Say, whenever we have a large scale of users, maybe 100 or 400 or 4,000, like these kind of users are there. Individually managing the users is little challenging. That is the reason we are going to assign the permissions to the groups. Now I have a doubt here. Can one user can reside in two groups? One user can reside in two groups.
Yeah, one user can reside in two
Yes.
groups.
One user can be, say, suppose both the permissions is going to get it. Now here, when one tricky kind of thing or challenging kind of thing we need to understand, like on the IAM is IAM roles, and even when we are discussing S3 buckets or Kubernetes, for every service, we are going to discuss IAM roles. Means at the end of today itself, we don't understand the IAM roles. Like when we discuss about the EKS clusters or ECS, Lambda, flow logs, CloudWatch, okay, or for the other services also, mostly to give the permissions, we are going to give the IAM role. Okay, so users are straightforward to the persons we are going to allocate, but IAM users for one service, I want to allocate access or permission for other service, then I'm going to create the role. I'll tell one example for understanding purpose. You are installing maybe Instagram on your mobile. For Instagram, like you may have your username password, that is the user level. But your Instagram may use other services in the mobile, right? What are those services used in the mobile? Like it may use the contacts or maybe like photos. It may use your location. For all those, you are giving the services permissions or not? Means for Instagram, you are giving the permissions to access your messages or maybe your contacts or maybe for your photos, galleries, or maybe like for other services like location, map. For all this, you are giving the permissions or not? Means you are not giving to the other user or your friend to access your Instagram. The Instagram to access other services, we are giving the permissions. Now, I have an EC2 instance on behalf of us. EC2 want to execute one Lambda function, or VPC want to store all the logs in CloudWatch, or I want to use S3 bucket, or Lambda want to execute one SNS or trigger or SQS kind of trigger. These kind of use cases, we required IAM roles because we are not allocating to the users. We are allocating to whom we are allocating
To the application.
the other services. Or when we want to give the cross account access, what is the meaning of cross account access? Is I'm a developer in one AWS account I have, but I want to access one S3 bucket for my data processing, but that bucket is in another account. Then I'll get like a temporary access to that by assume role. Say here we have one concept, assume role. Okay, so we have a lot of use cases while use IAM roles also we will discuss. But as of now, try to understand. We have one AWS service. I want to give the access to one AWS service to access another AWS service. In that, I'm going to use the IAM roles. But to the person straightforward, I want to give, so person is the entity. I want to give the access to administrate AWS resources. So for that, I'm going to use the users, and we want to apply similar kind of permission. Say suppose when we have a equivalence class of people, I want to give the similar kind of permissions roles, otherwise I need to send it to 10 people. Say suppose even in your Facebook we have the groups, or in WhatsApp we have the groups. Always the advantage is you no need to manage individually. I have same developers we have. they want the similar kind of permissions. If I give her the user level, 100 times I need to create. Okay, but if I go for groups, I'm going to create a developer group and I'll add these 100 users to that same group. Then automatically they're going to get the same permissions. So when we want to give the group level permissions in the large scale kind of user base, better to go for the groups than individual users. Okay. Then we have the policies. The policies are nothing but the permissions we are going to define. Like we can give the permission. Say suppose I'll tell one use case. I'm going to create a policy for like EC2 full admin level. I want to give the permissions. Means on the EC2 services, and EC2 may use some services like VPC, EBS volumes, or CloudWatch. So I'm getting other permissions also, basic permissions, but I can manage anything on EC2. Okay, that is one like policy. Okay, so then I'm going to give one more policy to the user, EC2, only read only. Then he can't create the instance also. What he can do? He only just view the permissions. So like this, here we have the different policies. What is the policy is define the permissions. If I attach a policy to the user or role, what permissions that user or role is getting, we are going to use. By default, we are using a root account. Root account having the full admin permissions. It's the in the DevOps or in the cloud. One of the best practices is don't share all the privileges. Okay, so then here we have the different type of policies. We have managed policies, and in the managed policies, those have been created by the AWS, or we can also create our own managed policies, and directly we can attach to the IAM users, groups, or roles. AWS recommend always to use the managed policies. What are these types also we'll discuss. And if I go for a policy, like here any IAM policy, either graphically GUI wise we can give the permissions, or we have a JSON format. And in the JSON format of the IAM policy, we have the version and we have the statement, like whether we give allow or daily kind of permissions, and for what actions, like maybe I want to read, write like this here, get, put like this here, we have the different actions and on which resource, and if have any conditional policies also we can specify. Now, so now here we have, this is the version of the JSON, and I'm going to give the allow to maybe list of buckets, whatever the list of buckets we have, and in this resource. Okay, then get object, I can retrieve the resources also in the bucket. Okay, so like this, I can't delete those because I don't have the permission. So this is one of the example of a policy. Okay, we'll discuss more on the policies also. And the policies level also, to the user or group level we can attach, or to the services. In the above scenario, we are given the permission to S3 bucket. Okay, if I attach that policy to the user, he will get that at the user level, he is going to get the permissions. Or I can give to the to the resource level also we can attach. At the role base also, we are giving the permissions on the resource base. Okay, so now here I'll explain more. We have the policies. If someone asks about policies, means policies are going to define the permissions. Okay, so what are the permissions we are setting, or what are the actions or that resource level the user can perform? We are going to specify by policies. The policies can be attached to the users, groups, roles, or other services. Sometimes we'll give the permissions to other account also. Okay, so now we have the identity base. In the identity base, we are going to create the policies to the users, groups, or roles, or we are creating even resource specific also, or resource based also we are creating. And in the managed policies are, like AWS has provided more than 1,000 plus managed policies. Okay, so suppose here example is, if maybe EC2 read only access, or EC2 full access, or ECR level, or RDS level, S3 level. And if I give the administrator access, then that user can do anything in that account. but not recommended to give administrator access to everyone. Or you can create your own customer managed policies also. Okay, instead of using, by default, AWS is providing a lot of predefined policies, but instead of using those policies, we can use AWS managed policies also. We can use, or instead of that, we can create our own custom policies. Say, suppose I give S3 access, then all the S3 buckets you can access, but I don't want to give the access to all the S3 buckets or all EC2 instances. I don't want to give. I want to give only for one EC2 instance or like resource specific. For that also we can go for okay. Say here or to the specific resource we want to give customer managed policies. We can go. Okay, then inline policies, we are directly attaching to a single user group or role. Okay, and that entity can't be reused. But managed policies are reusable kind of thing. Okay, it's a very specific kind of resource we want, inline policies, but AWS recommends to use managed policies itself. Okay, the resources, like maybe directly we're attaching to the AWS resource. So when we want to give the cross account access or like S3, KMS, SQS, for I don't want to give the access to all the resources. Then at the S3 bucket level, like here, I'm example hyphen bucket is my bucket name. That means that resource level itself, I'm going to give the permissions. Okay, and the permission boundaries, whether we are going to give like on the role base or we want to give the like maximum permissions we can give to the administrative access or to which services. And this one, like organization level also. So what is the as of now, what we are understanding is we have one AWS account. In that we have all these IAM users, but in the real time, multiple AWS accounts also we can manage through AWS organizations are landed zone. In this scenario, at the organization level, we have some service control principles, and that is overriding. That is overriding our like normal policies. That means service control principles. Okay, so at the IAM level, we have some permissions, but SCP level will have some permissions. Okay, then SCP itself will be controlling. Okay, these will have the more permissions because these are at the organization level. Okay, what are the permissions we can give? Those all we can give. Okay, so now here, this is one SCP I have given access control. These all we are going to manage at SCP is going to manage at organization level. Again, ACL is going to be managed at access control list. Don't get confused with NACL. But AWS not recommended to use ACLs because this is a very legacy method. Okay, so we are not using ACLs. What we are using is we are using the policies itself to control the resources. The ACLs access control list directly to the users we are going to use, but this is the old method. This is to the old method is the ACL. And assume role, I'll explain. We can generate a token. Like that token maybe works for only temporary access or sometimes that may be 60 minutes. I want to give the access for 60 minutes like this. Now, if I create a user unnecessarily after 1 hour, I need to delete only for particular duration or only for one time I want to give the access. Then we are creating the temporary roles or we can use a secure token. That token only works for one time or sometime what we have configured. After that, that is not going to work. Okay, so now here we are going to use like this kind of security policies we are using. In this scenario, we are going to use that. I want to give temporary access or I want to give only for one time. I want to give the access. So for that, I'm going to use. For that, I'm going to use the session policies. I'm going to use and inline policies. Like only one specific. We don't get reusability with that. We don't get the reusability only for a single user group we are attaching. we are giving the inline policies, but AWS recommended to use managed policies. And MFA, I hope everyone now it's mandatory, right? Within 30 days, for root account, we need to set up the MFA. What is the concept of MFA? Multi-factor authentication. So now here we can use authenticator app or any of the physical device also. Like we need to use the multi-factor authentication, especially for the important users. Like I have one user having IAM permissions, or sorry, he has EC2 full permissions, EKS permissions, or RDS permissions. That kind of users better to give. For that kind of users, better to give. For that kind of users, better to give multi-factor authentications. How an IAM user is having very limited permissions. You don't have access to RDS, you don't have EKS clusters, only for easy to read kind of permissions. You don't have to restart the services also, you don't have. Okay. But some companies may give for all the users MFA, but for which type of users recommended to go for MFA? For which type of users better to go for MFA? Which of the users having more permissions, more resource access, it's always recommended to give the, it's always recommended to give them the, it's always recommended to give them the MFA authentication. Okay, then even if their credentials or access keys, those have been shared by someone, we don't get that, the resource access they don't get because they can't log in without having the second level of access token or authenticator kind of app. They're not going to get that. Okay. So then we'll discuss, we are using the IAM. Then what are the best practices we need to follow for IAM? Okay. So what are the best practices we need to follow for the IAM level we are going to discuss? So now always in the DevOps level, what is the best practice we need to follow is follow the principle of least privilege. Means for the users, unnecessarily don't give more resources, always give the least privileges. Okay, unnecessarily don't give more privileges. Okay, so whenever they want, only at that moment enable those permissions to those resources. Okay, so this always we need to follow. Unnecessarily don't give the permissions to the resources. Unnecessarily don't give the permissions to the resources. Okay, so this is the basic principle even in the cloud and DevOps wise. Okay, unnecessary permissions we shouldn't give. Okay. Yeah, any doubts on this? So then, like here, we need to, for EC2 instance, instead of user, an EC2 instance want to call a Lambda function programmatically, or it want to write something in the CloudWatch, then like we are attaching to the instance profile roles we have, and we are attaching those IAM roles to the instance instead of storing directly the AWS credentials. Now to whom we are giving the permissions is IAM roles we are going to give the permissions. So that is one of the best practice. Instead of directly storing those application settings, all those, better to give the permissions to the permissions to the EC2 instance of that kind of service itself. We are going to give the permission access. So this is the second best practice. And always don't use the root account access. Okay, disable the root account access and create an IAM user for that. Create an IAM user and give that user access to that. Okay, then always enable the MFA also for the privileged users, and access keys, secret keys, maybe for 30 days, 60 days. It's mandatory. What we need to do is we need to rotate those keys also. Okay, so what is the advantage with the rotation is? What is the advantage with the rotation? What is the advantage with the rotation is, say even someone stores our credit also, they can't use. Every company will have the policy, like we need to rotate the keys for every 30 days, like this, we need to rotate the keys. Okay, So that is also one of the best practices. Definitely we need to follow in our company. Okay. So then better to use managed policies. Okay. Compared to like custom policies or inline policies. Okay. So then how you can monitor your IAM activity is AWS is providing a CloudTrail service, and using that CloudTrail, we can monitor our AWS resources. We can monitor our AWS resources can be completely monitored by using the CloudTrail. So every week like this, make sure we should monitor our cloud infrastructure, all the activities and account login, all these also. Better to audit also. Okay, so better to audit all those services. Better to audit. Okay, then before applying the policies to the user, verify the resultant set of policy also. Like here, what is the final set of policies? Because in the least privilege, if you give any more privileges, that's a challenging. That there is an always we need to check like evaluation logic in the policy level. We need to check that evaluation logic and whether we have given the right permissions or not. Okay, then so we have access analyzer, credentials report. Okay, so when they have access, the last login, when they have used these kind of reports also we can use. Okay, so then even we will give the cross account access also. And once we given the permissions and their job is done, what we need to do is we need to delete those kind of permissions also. Don't keep permanently. Okay, so once your work is done, we need to clean up those permissions also. Then here we are creating an IAM user. So what is the CLI? These are the CLI level I will explain. We can use the command line instead of GUI. We can create. And coming to the pricing wise, okay, AWS won't charge any money for the policies. It's a free service itself. Okay, so if the users or roles, more users or more roles are accessing that, then AWS is going to charge the money for that. Okay, so already we discussed the best practices, right? So now here in the best practice, always enable the MFA and use roles or IAM users itself instead of root account. Then follow the principle of least privilege. Only basic minimum permissions only you need to create. Unnecessarily don't give more permissions, and review all those also whether we have given the right permissions or not. And we can use the IAM roles for services, rotate your keys, and we can set up the permission boundaries also. And management policies are recommended to use. And compared to groups and users, which is recommended to use, IAM groups is recommended compared to IAM groups is recommended compared to the users. So instead of users, recommended to go for the groups itself is recommended by AWS.
Sir, I
Okay.
have a question.
Yeah.
Now that we got a clarity about this IAM, how do we know what, see, for a basic understanding, once we get into the job, what sort of permissions can we expect to come? These are basics.
So it's
This
all decided by the manager.
okay.
It depend on our permissions, all these in the company. These all decided by the architect and manager. We are going to give those permissions to the users.
Okay.
And definitely application level or resource level, if they want the permissions, you are not going to decide that. Your project manager or their project manager is going to decide. According to that, you are going to give those permissions to them. Means that approval is coming not from you. That approval is coming from his project manager.
What permissions do we have, sir? What do we have? Only
That depends upon the company. We can't generalize.
Okay.
So sometimes you may be not an IAM guy to manage, then you will have only basic permissions only. Okay, for the users, you also need to create the permissions, all those. Then you will have the permissions to create more users, and you can define their scope, policies. That depends upon the project. Every
Got
AWS guy may not have access to everything. Is it clear? So we can't generally we can't tell these permissions you'll have that. That's purely project specific. Okay. Then, like here, we need to always recommend it to use managed policies, and like group users, better to use them into groups we need to create. Then we need to implement the strong password policies also we need to set up. Okay. Then at the resources level also we can give the restrictions on, say, all resources. Say suppose I give the EC2 full permission like this, instead of giving that, at the resource level also better to use the policies. That means if I have 100 buckets, I don't want to give the access to all the 100 buckets. Okay, so give the resource level itself. Then we need to enable CloudTrail. And what we can do with the CloudTrail is we can audit your IAM activity, and we can use CloudWatch, AWS config also for all these kind of verification. All these we are going to use. Okay, so from this we are going to manage what are the permissions we need to set. All these we are going to define. And always we need to review the permissions and whether we have given the right permissions or not, and don't give more permissions. All these also we need to test. Okay, so we have the tools for this policy evaluation. All those also we can do it. And every week also we need to review. So suppose sometimes if you create an instance also in the real time without having the permission, like you may get a notification also why you have created without having the permission. Okay, then definitely like there should be a business reason why you have like created that instance. Otherwise, for the first time, they may give the excuse. Going forward, if you're repeating the same stuff, they may fire you also. Okay. Hence, without having the permission, we shouldn't create any single resource also in the real time. Okay. Yeah. Any doubts on this? And we have even organizations and service control policies also we have. We have a multi-account, maybe say suppose I have 10 different AWS accounts for 10 different projects. I don't want to maintain 10 members to manage those. So we'll create an AWS organization, and from this itself we are going to control everything. From this itself we are going to control the resources, all those we are going to control. For that we are going to set up SCP, service control policies. So at what level we are going to apply is for the multiple organization level, we are going to enforce those policies. Multiple organization level, we are going to apply those policies we are going to apply. Okay, so then always recommended to use the tags also. Based on the tags, we can track the IAM users or policies also. Like for the cost allocation, governance, it is one of the best practice. I'll explain tax also is one of the best practice in the cost explorer. I'll explain. With this, what we can do is the overall cost we can reduce. The overall cost we can reduce by using the task like a cost explorer. And for that, definitely we are going to use tag based. And in the companies also, in a lot of projects, if we don't have the tags to resource, means we created the EC2 instance, VPC, like optionally we are choosing the tags, but if you don't use the right tag, like in the company, we'll have some automation that automatically will delete that resource also. Why that is getting deleted? At the time of provisioning itself, that resource is getting deleted because we have not used the appropriate tags to the provision the resources. Okay, so hence in the real time it's mandatory we need to use appropriate tags also. Okay, so then What is the meaning of IAM user and role? So this is mandatory question from the interview wise also. Then can you tell me what is that? What is the difference between IAM user and IAM role? What is the difference between IAM user is to the person we are attaching to access the AWS resources, all those permissions we are defining, whereas IAM role is to other AWS services, like our one AWS service want to access other AWS service. Okay, then for that we are going to use the permissions. So for this we are going to use IAM roles. IAM roles. Okay, so now here we want to give the permissions, or maybe sometimes for the users, not only for AWS services, but assume role kind of thing, or means temporary permissions, all those also we can give, or other accounts also, or I have my third party application, I want to give the permission for AWS services. Okay, or we want to use any AWS service programmatically. For all these, we need to create the IAM roles. Okay, so we need to discuss what are the different type of IAM roles we have. Okay, so first one is the service role. What is the meaning of service role is? Like for EC2, I want to give the access to Lambda, or Lambda, I want to give the access for CloudWatch or CloudTrail. So these kind of permissions for one service, for other service, I'm going to give. Okay, so now here for the if I attach this policy to my EC2, then EC2 can access that my bucket, and it can retrieve those objects also. Means I'm not giving this to the user. To whom I'm giving? Maybe if I attach to EC2 instance, I'm getting the permission to the EC2 instance. If I attach this to Lambda, Lambda can access that. Lambda can access that S3 bucket. It can access. Okay. So otherwise. So now here we want to use AWS organization level or RDS level also. We have the service linked. Okay, automatically. So here we are going to give the permissions to manage backups and monitoring. That means within the service itself, it won't access like maybe service linked role it is performing. That means for RDS instance, I want to give the backup permissions. Okay, so like these examples we are going to use. A service role we are creating. Our cross account access is, I said one example, one other account developer want to access our another account. We have the S3 bucket. For this, I want to give the access to them. Or temporarily, I want to give. Okay, so like this, we are going to give their account B ID, root we need to give. In the S3, definitely we need to use this use case. We need to have the two AWS accounts, and IAM user is in account B, S3 bucket is in account A. We need to give that cross account access we need to provide. Okay, so these steps, and also we need to create through IAM role itself. And federated role is for the any, say suppose I have an SAP system or maybe other application want to access any of the AWS resources. It's not only SAP, maybe a third party application we have, that's it want to communicate with the our AWS services. For all those, we need to use the federated roles or federated policies also we need to give. Okay, so we have the authentication, single sign on, all those, and from this it's going to provide the communication. And organization level, also this is that the AWS organizations will discuss. This is having high priority also. Okay, so what are the use cases we have to provision the IAM role is? So already as we discussed, EC2 instance want to access S3 bucket, DynamoDB or any database or CloudWatch, SQS, SNS. Then I don't want to store my credentials in my EC2 instance because everyone may watch that, or who have access to that may watch, but I'm giving that permission to the EC2 itself. Okay, so that means on behalf of the user, EC2 instance is going to access to the S3 bucket. Or another use case why we are using is cross account access, or not only for EC2 instance, Lambda also, or I want to give single sign-on kind of thing. Okay, federation access to other applications also want to communicate with AWS. For that also we are giving the role. Okay. So then even for pipelines also now the best practice is previously we used to pass the Jenkins credentials, but now what we have learned is we are giving a role itself to the DevOps tools like Jenkins, GitHub, or AWS code pipeline. We are going to give the permissions and that role we are attaching to Jenkins. Then Jenkins will deploy the code to EC2 instance or maybe AWS Artifactories, or it's going to deploy to ECS, EKS. Like this here, we are not storing the credentials. We are going to use the IAM role we are attaching to that. In that, we are going to define the permissions. Okay, so with this, what is the advantage is you no need to store the credentials in your scripts or somewhere in the third-party tools also, you no need to integrate. We are just giving that role to that. Okay, but always remember, give the least privileges itself. Unnecessary permissions is not a best practice. Okay. And here IAM role is an identity. Okay, so we'll discuss that IAM user versus IAM role. Okay, so temporarily it's assumed by entities such as users also we can give, or applications also, services, or other AWS accounts also. We are defining those permissions that can be temporarily assumed by those entities. And these are not the permanent kind of credentials. Okay, so then which is more secure? Which is more secure? IAM roles itself is one of the best practice. Then we have the IAM user. IAM user, we are storing the permanent credentials, and in that we are going to store those credentials we are going to store. Okay, so then like we don't have a long-term credentials we have. It provides the temporary security credentials, maybe sometimes one-time access, or maybe like I want to give the 60 minutes like this also we can give the access. IAM user, till the credentials have been rotated, the user can use those credentials. Okay, then IAM role for temporary access or cross-account access. For federation access, we are going to provide. But if you want to give any permanent user identity for the users, better to go for IAM users. So we have a long-term employees IAM users. For them, it's recommended to give users or groups. Okay, temporarily or cross-account, or only whenever like instead of hard coding the credentials for the AWS services, we want to give the permissions to other access or federated access also other external applications or external application users want to access. For that also we can provide. Okay, so for our internal employees, for the QA engineers or DevOps engineers, for developers, we are going to give the IAM users. Okay, the permissions, roles are assumed kind of things, and we can attach the permission boundaries and trust relationships. Then with that, we are going to define. And here we have the managed policies or resource specific policies. Directly we are attaching to the IAM user. Okay, so which is more secure is IAM role itself is secure than IAM user. Definitely for the mitigation purpose, we need to use the strong password policies and definitely need to enable MFA itself.
In that case, when the root user will use actually, I mean, for only testing purpose?
No, for the root user only for the first time itself.
Okay.
After that, you create a one IAM admin user itself.
Okay, good. Yeah, the two large.
Yeah, so after that, everything need to do from that IAM user, admin user itself.
Okay. The company who create the, I mean, we create and they create a security.
IAM maybe company may create it.
Okay.
After that, say for the who is the admin in that company, for them they are going to create. The company email ID they'll use, that means company will have that email ID, right? Some not individual, that email ID they may use for root account, but they don't share that account. For everyone, they are going to create an IAM user itself. Okay, so some X is the user, company account is there, then company first will create X user. Okay. And always AWS is telling to disable that root account access also. Okay, so don't use root account access from the second time onwards. For the first time when we log into the root account, what we need to do? For the first time when we log into the root account, what we need to do is we need to create an IAM user and create the permissions for that.
Yes, remember, like yesterday he showed it. I got it now.
Okay. So that is the best practice. Some companies may follow or may not follow. Okay. But IAM user is like a least efficient for cross-account access. We need to give the IAM role itself. Okay. For temporary access, better to go for IAM role. Okay. IAM user will have a long-term access. And federation wise also, what is meaning of federation is that maybe not IAM user, other application user want to communicate AWS services for that. Okay. So then when you need the temporary access or for cross-account access or for third-party applications, I want to give single sign-on kind of access. Okay. For all these, we need to use IAM roles. The IAM users, like today itself, we don't understand all these. When we are discussing S3, RDS, or when we have EKS clusters, they're all we are going to use all these practically we are going to use. At that moment, you will understand. But this one I'm keeping like for the reference purpose and even for the interview purpose also, we need to understand all these terms, all these. That is the reason everything terminology wise I'm explaining. Practically, while working with the EKS or RDS, CloudWatch, CloudTrail, SQS, SNS, for all those services, we are definitely need to give the permissions. And for S3 also, cross-account access also we need to provide. Then, so already we have discussed most of the use cases also. So now we have a web server running on EC2. That application want to retrieve one data from the S3 bucket, or it want to store all the log data to CloudWatch. Then for the EC2, for S3 bucket, I need to give the permissions, and even for CloudWatch also, I need to give the permissions, appropriate permissions I need to give. Okay, but this role I need to attach to. That role I need to attach to the EC2 instance. Say in the advanced options of the EC2 instance, okay, in the instance profile, this role we can give. That means I'm giving that permissions to EC2 instance. Then in the same way, Lambda also on behalf of us, we have developing a serverless application, and that serverless application want to use CloudWatch or maybe S3 bucket or RDS or DynamoDB. Then for the Lambda, we need to have the permissions to perform those. These all we need to give that at the Lambda level we need to give. Or my Kubernetes cluster want to create a EBS volume, or I want to give the load balancer need to be created. That means to whom we are creating. We are not creating. Our Kubernetes cluster is creating at the EKS level. Then for that EKS, we require those roles should be there. The third reason why we'll go for IAM roles is cross-account access also. The fourth reason why we'll go for this is like for the federation access. That means third-party applications also want to give the access, or for CI/CD pipelines also. Okay, so these all we have already discussed the use cases. Why we'll go for IAM kind of users. Okay, so what IAM is going to provide is identity and access management for the AWS resources, and we can provide authentication, authorization, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, federation kind of services for the AWS service level or cross-account level or multi-account, or we can manage using organizations and SCPs. Then we can use even for the applications, like I have an SAP application or maybe one e-commerce application. Those applications also want to access some AWS services. For that also we want to give the permission access. Jenkins want to communicate. For those also we need to give the permissions. Okay, for all these we have a managed service. That is IAM is the managed service we have. Okay. Yeah. Any doubts on this? Any doubts? Then here, CloudTrail is also one of the very, very important service. What is the purpose of the CloudTrail is, why I'm telling to not to use root account access is, like if I have 10 members, today one EC2 instance got deleted in our environment. So everyone used the same root account. Then everyone will tell tomorrow, we don't know who deleted that EC2 instance. But in our use case, what is going to happen now? Like for all the 10 members, we don't have anyone have the root access. Okay, everyone have 10 members having 10 members having their own IAM users. Okay, then I'm going to check like from the CloudTrail. What is the CloudTrail is? It's an auditing kind of thing. Are all administrative events are going to be recorded in the CloudTrail, and by checking the CloudTrail, like who perform those administrative operations can be tracked from the CloudTrail. What is the advantage is, like you did programmatically or from third-party tool or whatever it may be, that's used the resource from AWS, that administrative event can be tracked from the CloudTrail itself. Okay, so for the auditing purpose, security purpose, and whether you have connected or not, or some kind of operations, like whether you have performed, say that is the reason you should be very careful with the CloudTrail, because you didn't do anything or you didn't connect it to the AWS, but you were telling to your manager, yesterday I worked for 8 hours, 10 hours, that's all can be tracked here. Okay, and I deleted an instance or I deleted one RDS. Who deleted that? At what time it deleted? Even the deletion failed also because I don't have permission, but that event is logged. Then my manager may ask me, why you try to delete the database? Okay, so I hope you understood, right? What is that CloudWatch is used for? CloudWatch is used for. The CloudWatch is used for the monitoring purpose, whereas CloudTrail is used for auditing purpose, or all administrative events we can track from the CloudTrail. Okay, and by default, explicitly, we no need to enable anything. It's going to log automatically all the events, either from the management console or programmatically through SDKs or from AWS CLI or from third-party tools also like Terraform. All those, it's going to be perform, like it's going to track all these. Who created would be tracked, and that user is definitely should be responsible for this. Okay, so for that we need to explain, like why you have done those, all we need to explain. Okay, all the event login and we can get if you have any unusual operations or admin activities are happening on your CloudTrail or some APIs, someone trying to access your AWS account. Okay, so then these all we can set up. Okay, now based on the like EC2 instance termination, I want to send a notification also. Then from the CloudTrail, I'm going to recognize for this specific resource, one EC2 instance is getting deleted and initiated by this, excuse me, by this user, and I can send a notification also by using AWS Lambda. But that event incident has been identified from the CloudTrail. Okay, from the CloudTrail, like we have an event, what is the record of action has been taken, and we are going to send like a event, what event we have performed, and what we can trigger for that also we can manage. That means for the administrative events, even we can integrate with automation by using Lambda kind of thing, or we can send a notification at least by using SNS. Okay, so CloudTrail by default we are getting, but if you want any additional trial, you can create a trial for this. And by default in the CloudTrail, all those events are going to store in 90 days. All those events are going to store in 90 days. If we want to keep more than 90 days, so suppose my client wants for 365 days, that's a configurable. Means we may need to use S3 bucket additionally to store those events. But by default, AWS is maintaining those events for 90 days. They're going to keep it. Okay. And even the timestamp also is very, very important here. At what time that performed also can be tracked. A lot of people, like one thing what you need to remember is never log into your AWS account once you leave that project or once you leave that company, and don't try to access also, because that event also would be recorded in that failure event also may be recorded. Okay, so that is also not good for us. Unnecessarily our company people will get a doubt why he is trying to access our resources. Okay, so then a lot of people went to jail also, because sometimes company may not delete your account. With that, a lot of people have been log into those servers and they have performed some deletion kind of things. Definitely we need to go to jail itself. Okay, so that's the reason once you join the company, never
There is
try
no
to access.
sandbox. I mean, for example, you said that you're talking about the production system. Like every company have there is a sandbox system, right, where we can do some
No,
access.
but they may have access to the production also, right?
Okay.
They're doing intentionally. In UK, one guy has been degraded the server performance.
Okay.
Intentionally he did that, but he prisoned, like he sent to prison for more than 3 years. But the company can track it from where? From the CloudTrail.
Okay.
Okay. So even recently, maybe 6 months back or 3 months back, one guy did the same thing in Singapore also. He's from Indian-based guy itself in Singapore. As he filed, he deleted the important servers. Okay. So definitely we need to go to jail if you perform those kind of operations. Maybe accidentally if we delete in the project, maybe some excuse may be there. But when we do these kind of things intentionally, very serious action would be taken care by the legal team in the company. But from where they're tracking this is, like in UK, I said, right, one company, like a ex-employee took the access of one employee from the current employee, he took the credentials and he performed all these operations. Okay, first the company will suspect to whom? To the current employee itself, they will suspect. But later they will identify the IP address, all those they will have. The AWS also will provide the necessary information. With that, they have tracked and they have taken the legal action. So what I'm trying to do is 99% your access would be removed. Okay. And with the rotation also, what is the meaning of key rotation? What is the meaning of key rotation? Always rotate the keys also. Means even someone, say my friend also knows my credentials. After 30 days, if I rotate, at least what is going to happen? He don't know my new credentials, right? Okay. So that is the purpose. Always we need to rotate your credentials. Always rotate your credentials also. Okay, so CloudTrail is the service what we are going to use is all administrative events, okay, such as creating, modifying, deleting, okay. So then like we perform some resource level actions, all these can be tracked. Okay, so that's we need to analyze and we can use the automation also. And even in the insights, if unusual activities are happening, lot of APIs hitting programmatically, the sudden spike of APIs hitting, all these events are recording also. We need to troubleshoot why those things are happening. Okay, and by default, we are getting CloudTrail, but we can enable our own multiple trials also for the AWS regions. Okay, and we can integrate with the CloudTrail events using the Lambda functions. We can do, say, suppose I take one example. Say one EC2 instance has been one EC2 instance has been deleted all of sudden, but I want to call one Lambda function before deleting that EC2 instance. What I want to do is I want to collect all the logs in that EC2 instance. Means who is going to recognize that instance is getting deleted from the CloudTrail. Or CloudWatch can also recognize that instance is getting a shutdown kind of thing. But before doing that, we can call to a Lambda function. We can call to a Lambda function. Or we can call one automatically to start an instance if something happened. Okay, so these kind of events we can track it with from the CloudTrail events to Lambda functions, we can use the automation. Okay, so then we have one more service that is also very, very important. And that service name is Trusted Advisor. So what Trusted Advisor is going to do is, like, is going to give the advisors for us. Got to hear? I have my use case. My client is daily telling, need to perform cost optimization. Need to perform the cost optimization. Then, like, which of the unnecessary resources you are using, that's like AWS will suggest to you. These resources you have not used. Okay. So that means what AWS is providing is by using the trusted advisor, you want cost optimization or you want to improve the performance, or we have some security bottlenecks where we need to improve the security, and we want high availability fault tolerance, or your service quotas are limiting. That means for S3 bucket, I have 100 buckets I can create, but already I use 95%. Then I'm going to get some like advisors, already 95% of the resources have been used. So these kind of advisors we are getting from trusted advisor, and always make a best practice of at least weekly verify what are the advisors have been given by AWS, and you analyze those advisors. Don't blindly follow, but you analyze those advisors and even inform to your client also. And after that, you perform the actions. So for which kind of categories AWS Trusted Advisor is giving the advices for us? One is for cost optimization. Second one is for the performance. And third one is for the security. Okay. Say suppose I open unnecessarily private subnets, or I have not enabled DDoS protection or the VPC, or not configured the web application firewall. Like these all the security best practices they will suggest to us. Whether you will follow or you don't follow is up to us. Okay. But in the free account, we are using the basic account, right? Okay. So if you have unused IP addresses or have used very bigger instance size, we not use 20% also. Then they will suggest to like uh, right sizing of the instances, right sizing of RDS. All these AWS is going to suggest for us. Or now if the client is telling budget is not an issue, but I want performance, then we need to fine tune our application. Then they're going to give the performance wise also we are going to get the some like uh, advisors we are going to get it, and security wise also. Okay, so you didn't enable MFA, S3 bucket level, you have given the permissions to a lot of users, or you didn't plan the backups or replications to other regions, or your like quotas are exceeding. All these we are going to get with the trusted advisor. Okay, by default, like for the free account, for like here in the trusted advisor, if you see green means no issues found, yellow means there are some warnings. Red means definitely we need to take some action on those. Okay. So then, like here, you can send an SNS kind of notification also we can send. And always, I said, right, at least weekly or monthly, definitely review those and discuss those with the team, with the client, and get the approvals and try to follow those advices. Okay, then right sizing the resources also from the CloudWatch, from the trusted advisors, we can always give the right size of the image instance. With this, we can reduce the cost. Okay, and if any of the quotas have been exceeding, definitely the new services we may not create. Then at least you can contact the AWS support center to increase those quotas. Okay, and with the basic plan for security and service only, we are getting the advisors. Okay, for if you enable the trusted advisor for the fault tolerance or for performance, okay, so for that they will charge the money with the basic and development plan. But we have business and enterprise support plan. We are getting for cost optimization, performance. For all this, we are going to get. You no need to pay any money for that. Okay, but in the free account or basic account plan, we have only for security and service limits. But for the business or enterprise account, all advisors we are getting. Okay, so that means whenever we want to like improve the performance or fault tolerance, or we want to improve the security, or we want to cut down the cost, then the first place we need to come is the first place we need to come for this is the trusted advisor. Okay. I shared one more also on the Saturday. I think Friday I shared one IAM user. Have gone through that IAM user video. So in that we have created the IAM users, all these also. Go through that video also once. Then like when we are creating the like S3 buckets or EKS, all these practically also we'll see. But basic IAM user creation for all that I have shared one video. Okay, so that's try to finish once. Okay, and VPC also try to finish all the VPC related. Even if you want to enable flow log also, what is the concept of flow log is have a VPC or subnet or instance at the subnet level. Like I have a private subnet, my company management want to track who are from which IP. Like people are trying to access that subnet. I want a log. Okay, so for that at the subnet level, what we need to enable is we need to enable a flow log. Then in the last 24 hours, who try to like access my subnet, they may be not successful because maybe NACL is blocking or security group may be blocking, but I want to get those IPs. Okay, so that can be tracked by flow logs. Okay, and the flow logs where we can store is in the maybe S3 bucket or CloudWatch log groups we can create. Okay, so that's we need to set up before itself. Then if something some IPs we can track who are trying to access our subnets or our instances. But for that also, like maybe I have like a VPC or my subnet want to access S3 bucket or I want to store in CloudWatch, then that appropriate permissions we need to give. That appropriate permissions we need to give. Okay, further also for this lab also we require definitely IAM roles we need to understand. Users, groups, policies, these all straightforward. Okay, so everyone go to IAM and with the different usernames and different groups you create and define the permissions and attach those to those users or groups. And you can create your own custom policies also. Okay, so this all in the going forward, we'll discuss more deep into this. Okay, so tomorrow I will explain. Mostly auto scaling, I'll explain. Okay. Sure, I'll share this one. Okay. Sure. Thanks for everyone. And I'll share some more videos also. Parallelly finish those videos also.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sure.